Hello and welcome to another episode of the Testing Peers. Tonight we are going to talk about the impact testing has on business values, business goals, business objectives. We have a slightly different lineup again tonight. We're joined by Chris.
Hey.
David.
Hello.
And Shey.
Hey, how's it going?
We are delighted that Saffron QA continued to sponsor the podcast. Saffron QA is a specialist in testing recruitment, offering permanent contract and a newly developed retained recruitment service. More details can be found in the show notes, or please reach out to Ben directly to find out more. And as a baptism of fire, Shey, I believe you're on banter.
Hey, my first attempt at being on banter. I hope I can keep the level to its highest, as it's always been. I would like to know, what fictional world or place would you like to visit? Or non-fictional, to be fair. But I like the idea of it being a fictional world or place. That's a bit of a mind bender, that one.
I'll start. I'd like to go to Jurassic Park on a safe day. Or maybe Jurassic World on a safe day. I think the whole idea in terms of being able to see actual dinosaurs living out in the open, all that stuff, like, yeah, when all the grand music's playing and all that stuff is kind of awesome. I know the bad stuff happens and stuff, spoiler alert, but how amazing would it actually be to go and walk among the dinosaurs? That'd be pretty amazing. And also maybe get to meet Jeff Goldblum.
That's a good one. I love it. And I love that you talked about the music playing everywhere. Are you picturing having in one of those cars a whole orchestra going doo 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 doo?
But well, yes, but think about also if you're in Alton Towers, often you just hear the whole time dum 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 dum, and it'd be kind of like that, but obviously the John Williams kind of.
But the Jurassic Park.
I went to a dinosaur park in Norfolk and they had that Jurassic Park theme playing everywhere around the whole place.
Wow.
Was it raw dinosaur park?
It was raw dinosaur park.
Fantastic.
Yes, it was. I'm kind of caught in two minds, really. I think I've always thought the Middle Earth, Lord of the Rings, I'd like to go back there. But then also Westeros, I think, as long as it's not in the middle of a bloodbath. But yeah, Westeros would be a good place to visit as well.
Well, I'm sure there's like 10 minutes you could find in Westeros.
Yeah, exactly,
it wasn't a bloodbath.
Exactly.
I'd quite like to go to Tatooine and visit the Skywalkers, basically.
Nice.
And then perhaps pick up some droids.
I had a bet somebody would go down the Star Wars route in that one. As for me, I would love to visit Ankh-Morpork from the Discworld novels. I'm quite a big fan of the Discworld. To hang out with Vimes and just sort of soak up his persona would be awesome.
Excellent.
Mind you, some of the lairs of some James Bond villains might be quite good to actually go and visit.
Oh, good call.
Or Gotham City and Batman's. Yeah, we could go on forever with this, couldn't we?
Yeah.
We've suddenly opened a can of worms.
We don't need to
There
talk
we go.
about anything else.
Yeah, I'm sure there's one corner of Gotham City you could stand for 5 minutes without being killed.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gordon lasted an incredibly long time.
Ah, yes. Good point.
All right. Well, our main topic tonight, I put out a post in May asking for topics for people to suggest. And Stuart Crocker came back with, what tangible impact has your testing had on your business goals? And we thought that sounded like a very good topic to talk about tonight. So what's your thoughts on the question? Where do you want to start?
I'll start it off. I was a consultant for quite a while, for about 10 years. Part of my role was normally getting parachuted into a dumpster fire and helping to stable the ship, as it were, and going through all the metaphors here and trying to use testing to get the development process and everything back on track. And the way I always talked about testing and the kind of work I did was that I would come in there and help get it testing up and running, which would give everybody a bit of confidence about their application. And when a business has a confidence about their application, they are therefore able to think about more riskier things to take on. And those are possibly the big money earners for them. But while they're in dumpster fire mode, they won't be able to take on the more riskier aspects of their business, and testing can lower the risk to the business so that they can go out into the market and be more competitive.
Yeah, I think you're right, Shey. I think for me, it's always that testing can give you the confidence and give you the support in the background to enable you to then move forward and do more risky things. Go for that extra 5%, go for that extra 10% of your targets, because you know your systems are in a good place because you've got the testing in a good way. But it isn't always that easy to sell. when it comes to selling it in that way. We can be the safety net, is a phrase that a lot of people cringe at when you talk about testing as a safety net. But we can't get away from the fact that in some places, good testing can act as that safety net to enable people to try more risky things.
Also, a thing Shey will know, working in computer games, very much one of the important things testing a computer game was not only testing whether or not the thing worked and you could achieve the things, but what it was like, whether you actually enjoyed the damn thing. When we tested driving games, they wanted people who were fans of driving games to actually play the game, because they could bring their experience of using these sorts of games from other people, but also they can talk about what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, what's realistic, what feels right, what feels wrong. And that sort of user experience kind of advocacy is really highlighted in computer games. I know it's not unique to computer games, but it's a really accessible way to talk about how that can be, because I can recall when I was working at the company that made Formula One, for example, and we had actual Formula One drivers trying the game out. And you can imagine the egg on our face if they start playing a game. Well, this is literally nothing like what it is to drive these games. It feels all wrong. Everything's incorrect. The artwork's rubbish. The graphics are wrong. There's sort of all of these sorts of physics and things are incorrect. The act of actually testing those things, actually really experiencing and living those things, that helped us to have that confidence that you spoke about, Shey, in what we were doing. And without that, I mean, people would just say, I tick the box on the acceptance criteria, hurrah.
So I would agree with all of you, everyone. Confidence, and also helps with maturity of the actual product or whatever you're actually producing. I think it's also quite an interesting thought process as to how you get that information back to it. And I know we probably mentioned it before, but how do we show what impact that testing has on the business? How do we convince the product owners, the PMs, the technical authorities on that what we've done has given them the confidence?
I think that's really interesting. And one of the obvious answers, I think, is to report on progress within testing. Drawing again on consulting days, you're always trying to make some sort of impact each day. And one way you can do that is report on progress of testing. But I don't think that sort of really is the full picture. I think being an advocate for the application, sort of circling around to what Chris was saying, being an advocate for that application and speaking to people about how good it is or where it can be improved, and literally being that champion for that part of the testing or that part of the application that you are working on, I think is a way to uncover that value. If they see somebody passionate about their craft, talking passionately about their application, then that gives a bit of confidence as well.
I was going to say, not so much about testing per se, but when we talk about quality activities, one of those things that we look to do in testing is we try to identify collaboratively what it is that we measure as good and bad, what is quality. We talked about that on previous episodes. But by having those conversations earlier and defining those things sooner means that we can then work towards those things. And so we're really helping to optimize and streamline our efforts so that we're not creating something that later down the line is bad. And that sort of, or missing the point, I suppose. A lot of when we talk about with testing is communication of discovery and feedback and tighter feedback loops. And so by being advocates of those things as early as possible and then just modeling those things as we go through in our testing, not just test cases and execution of those things, but in the interactions we have, the communication that we have, doing that as regularly and as often as we can do, that in itself provides value and hopefully has the impact of having something that we know sooner that this is on track with what we had agreed. We know like the level we're at, we know that when we can get those things done, theoretically, that's a tighter return on investment for us.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot to be said for raising the awareness internally of what good quality looks like and what good testing practices look like and how that rolls into the wider business objectives. But especially if you're not a solely tech company, having some element of the business goals that you can directly map to from a testing perspective is quite hard. I jumped for joy the other day when the words "with quality" were added to one of our company goals, because it obviously meant that something had changed in the mindset. But on the whole, if a company like my own company, an airline company, testing isn't going to be something that's thought about at a high level from the business goals. It's then working out how you can map those business goals down to that something that tangible that the testing can move the needle on. And that's where you look at, as we said, the feedback loops, the production issues, the customer satisfaction, the user experience, et cetera, and all these kind of things that give the perception of good quality or bad quality, depending on which way people are seeing it. And that's where we can make the difference in my eyes. It's the bits that are directly tangible to what the customer experience is, whether it's the quality of the software they're using, whether it's the experience they get, as Chris mentioned, with the gaming. That element, it's tying it back to how can we make quality in testing something that can directly impact the end user.
I'd like to go back to Shey's point earlier about being an advocate for good quality. And I would raise the point about being a critical friend. So a critical friend is someone who's advocate, good behavior, is behind the product, but will pick up issues or niggles or things with it. And I think that testers are generally good as critical friends. I would say we could do better at the support side. Sometimes in certain companies, we are seen more as the sort of critical side because we're only throwing issues. And perhaps we should be more the supporters of the vast majorities and big up the more positive side to, if appropriate, for the competence of the actual product.
It's one of those things where I think we also have to look at how organizations look at testing as a separate activity, totally to other things. And that also comes under like budget. Testing is purely a cost, right? It's not like we do testing and that makes the company money. And sometimes that can come down to how either we're measured or how we show what we have done. Have you ever found it quite difficult to articulate what you have done? I know we brought that back a little bit earlier, but it can be quite a difficult thing to sometimes articulate something in a way that somebody who is used to just seeing numbers, to try and talk about what the testing activities, the quality activities have done, what they have achieved, why they are of value and why they're beneficial. And I'm sure we've all had those conversations, but can we talk at all to how we have been able to maybe change minds or perceptions or bring people in to that way of working? That'd be quite an interesting sort of experience report to sort of listen to.
I think the closest I've got is what I've been doing recently in some respects with trying to bring in my quality coaching culture. And that instantly, as soon as you sort of say, well, I need money to spend on this, they're like, but where's the value? What are we going to see as an output? And it's then, well, there's no tangible, you're not going to see a physical output, but you're going to see a better quality of testing. You're going to see a better level of the end product is going to have a higher level of quality. There'll be less incidents, et cetera, et cetera. But until we've got the practice in place, that isn't going to be an overnight change. That's going to be a longer term evolvement of the culture. So it's difficult, I think, testing as a whole, unless you're talking about automation and faster delivery cycles and faster feedback loops, it's very difficult to actually offer something tangible as far as what testing is delivering that's going to provide more value to the company. The biggest one for me is always, we won't have those customers getting upset at 3 a.m. because we've done something wrong, et cetera, et cetera. But we've got that system solved now from a testing element.
It's very difficult to prove that, isn't it?
It is, absolutely, because it could just be, there's actually something else has changed and that's never going to be an issue anymore.
Yeah, because as soon as you get someone at 3 a.m. complaining, they go, oh, well, where's your value
there
now?
You go again. Yeah.
You promised us we wouldn't have any.
Yeah, it's like, how do you prove a negative? How do you prove something's not there? Well, you can't. And it's such an interesting point you make, Simon, about from the coaching point of view. And it really is difficult when, I guess perhaps that's why automation in organizations, automation testing is so highly valued, because you can literally see these many tests were run this many times. However, I had 3 conversations with developers on the teams about some tests they wanted to write, and they wrote them. Well, did that prevent any defects? Possibly, possibly not. But again, you can't prove a negative. So what did I do? Nothing. Did I add value to the company? I know I did, but there's no way I can't sort of, give you something that says, hey, I could write it on a post-it note. I added value today, but there's nothing really that you can show for it. It is an eternal struggle.
I was going to say also, I'm going to draw comparisons to parenting again. So forgive me, Shey, because I know this is your strong point, having done a wonderful talk on this. Nice little shout out for Shey. He's a very good speaker. Everybody hire him.
Thank you.
But the thing is, it's like people often look at the outcome of your upbringing of your children, and you don't necessarily see all the stuff that goes on behind closed doors. And also, influences are not just the parents to those things. Yet still there is judgment directed at the parents for how a child has turned out in one way or another. And we know, everyone knows in reality, that it isn't as simple as just saying the parents did a good job, therefore the child has turned out well. In the same way as you can do a really good job with software and creating good quality software and have good confidence because your tests reveal those things and still have something that's good at the end, without knowing all those ins and outs, how it was put together. And I kind of feel like that's often the way with testing, because you don't see everything unless you can give away too much information, right? As well, like people can get flooded with information. If you asked someone like me to talk about everything that we're doing, I wouldn't stop, right? But what is useful? What is information to you that would be helpful? And how can I share those sorts of things in a way that means that you can see that I, parent, I'm doing a job with my child. Maybe that means I spend time with my child reading with them each night so that they are practicing how to read. And we can abstract that into saying, well, maybe we can talk about code reviews, and we can talk about doing things in good ways where we communicate things and we're working together and pairing so that we're together learning to do things where maybe the more experienced person is helping with the other person. We can sort of abstract some of those things. But a lot of it is kind of just down to a feeling that we know what we're doing well. The outcome isn't always going to be the same, regardless of whether we do the exact same thing. I've got 2 children. I can do the exact same thing with both of them. They're not going to turn out the same. And it's nuanced.
Yeah, I've said this to my team a few times. You know, our users aren't robots. At the end of the day, every user acts differently. So regardless of how well we think we've tested it, there is a certain randomness with how users are going to use the system at the end of the day. So there is a bit like the parenting. No matter how good a job you do, there will always be other influences that could impact them in a more negative way or make them do things that you've not encouraged them to do, et cetera, et cetera. So there is always going to be an element of unknown unknowns. And that's where the risk mitigation side of things comes in. And that's where a lot of it is how we can identify the potential risks, that whether we've tested for them or not, we're articulating them, we're communicating with the business, we're identifying where we think there might be some risks, and we can then show the value in what we can do to help mitigate it. We can't solve the risk, but we can help reduce the impact of it by narrowing the margins that we believe we can test to this amount, but there is a risk that if we get over that amount of people buying tickets at the same time, et cetera, then there is a risk to the system. And there's elements of that we can do to bring the business on the journey as well, to highlight the risks and show them how we as a team can mitigate them to a level, but not remove them completely. And then that gives them the awareness earlier than they would have got if they'd got the big shock when it's gone live and gone bang without any notification.
Doesn't sound like we're assuring quality very much, Simon.
Well, we don't assure quality. I think
really?
We've got there a long time ago, right?
Well, while you're talking there, I was just reflecting on sort of how I think testing has changed. How does testing add value to a business? Well, the business has testers. Going back to the start of my career 20 years ago, and the eternal arguments about, well, what value do testers add? Why do we have them? Anybody can test. Why should we have a specialist tester and all that? All of those arguments have largely gone away, in my opinion, and please feel free to point out whatever, dear listener. In my experience, those arguments have largely gone away, and organizations bring in testers very early on in their formation. So I work for a startup, and the startup was about 6 or 7 months old, and I got brought on as the first tester, albeit more from a coaching point of view. But go back to 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years when I was working as a consultant and speaking to so many startups and going, hey, what do you do about testing? Do you think you need some testers? And they're like, no, we don't need testers. They don't add value. And so, yeah, I think there's a difference there as well. It's recognized that testing by a professional adds value to the organization.
You're right. There definitely is 2 schools of thought on that. I think there is definitely that case of there's a lot of value being added by the fact we've got testers in the building, but then there's another school of thought as well. Actually, let's move the other way now. We've got the value from the testing. We've taught the developers how to test, so we need less testers. But I think a lot of organizations, depending on which area of social media you talk to, depends where we are in that world right now. I think we're definitely more in the case at the moment of there's still value where testers can provide it.
It's a very bespoke thing, which I know we've hammered home a few times, but it really isn't the case where it has to be X number of testers to this number of developers or whatever. It just isn't. We've seen examples, fantastic tales of people who have started off with a bigger number of testers, and that number has reduced as the team's grown more mature and their quality approach has grown, and people have that quality culture within their team and they don't require specific bespoke people for those roles. That's great, but that isn't always the case, and not every team needs that. Not every company needs that, and sometimes they've got interesting budget things to discuss. Like, a question for you here is your budget for testing a part of your development budget, or is it separate? Does the reporting line go through the same people, or is it separate? Because that's a really interesting discussion to have.
Yeah, that's a challenging point I'm having at the moment, is building a new department of testers, which still embed them within the development teams, but now test budget's been siphoned off into me. There's still some areas that want to keep it all as one contained budget with development and test, but there's others that are like, oh yeah, testing budget goes over to Simon. So it's trying to work that way back in so that it's not seen as a separate cost and actually seen as part of the delivery budget for the process. But yeah, that's the challenging conversation I'm having at the moment.
I think I even heard once where the testing budget came through the marketing team. So effectively, the marketing team were the keepers of the testers in this organization. And
that's weird.
I know, right? I wish I could remember who it was that told me this. They were working at the time. It was one of those sort of like, yeah, you do need to get out of that organization if marketing are ruling the testing. I'm a great believer. You know, we talk, when I talk with some of you, we talk so much about how testing is just a natural part of the making of the application or the product. It isn't, and then we test. Testing is everywhere. I mean, again, I'm in a startup. I wear so many hats, and I go and I help out in all areas of the business. And I'm very fortunate to be able to do that with from a quality point of view. But testing is a whole organization thing. And to have a separate budget or whatever, maybe the budget is irrelevant. Maybe it's just the attitude. But yeah, the budget can be a sort of key marker on ostracizing testing from the development process. And I think, yeah, the more it can be included, the better.
It does come around to that culture of quality again, doesn't it? And having, if you have that belief in testing and quality as a whole team ownership, then that helps. Like you say, whether the budget's all aligned or not, whether everyone's on the same page, it just makes that whole process easier. And it means that testing is valued by everyone, the importance of it, whoever does it, whether it's the testers, whether it's the developers, whether it's the BAs, the business users, etc. They all understand the value of testing and what testing can bring to the business. And then you end up with much better outcomes.
Yeah, I find that's cool when you're an advocate for testing. And yeah, I love David's thing of being a testing advocate. And if you are truly an advocate for testing in an organization, you will encounter people outside of development teams picking up testing and using that in their daily work, or contributing into the application and going, hey, I want to take part in the mob testing. I really enjoyed that last time because all of a sudden I kind of get it. And that's really cool.
I was going to say another thing around what impact that can have to a business in testing is bringing other folks in. So like where I sat in one of my companies, it was my implied responsibility to spend time not just in development, but with support, with the technical writers, with marketing, with sales, with the BDRs, and all these different folks to sort of bring them in. Because as a tester, I'm incredibly inquisitive and I want to find out this stuff, but I also want to communicate out all this good stuff about our product and stuff. And quite often testers are kind of put in positions where a lot of sort of face of the team, face of the product doing demos or talking about things, because we've kind of gone out and pieced together all these different bits about our product, and we can be quite aware of these things. And as a result, we may have accidentally ended up being a means for like a common thread, a quality narrative, I think we've called it in some places, of those sorts of things permeating through the whole business allowing different teams to work to each other and be identified, because it can be the case in organizations where teams can operate quite a lot in silos, but because we testers, we're quite irritating when we talk to each other. We can have things like communities of practice or chapters or guilds or whatever our favorite word is this week. And we can share ideas and share practices, and that can bring us together. I do think testers have got a bit of that gluiness, that stickiness to us that can bring people in and sort of make those things happen. And maybe it's incidental, but I do think that on many occasions, it has been testers that I've seen have helped to bring together different departments and have those things more sort of brought in. I spoke just last week about personas in the workplace, and actually there's different departments. Guess what? They've got personas. Have I ever seen them? Have they ever seen mine? No. Let's talk about it and share and discuss purposes and what they could look like. That happened just because of an incidental thing where some tester likes to talk a lot.
I'd like to go back to that point you were saying about, the unique place that testers actually have. And I think that we are used to sell or to encourage the use of the product or whatever externally, because we've got a unique place as part of it, because we can see the progress and what I said before, the maturity of the product. We can see it improving, whereas often developers don't have that high level vision. And so therefore they don't see the improvements because they're caught up in whatever they're coding, whereas testers will actually see it. And as Chris said, we talk to people, we talk to everyone. I need to find out that information. How are people going to use that? Let me go and talk to them. Let me go and talk to those people. How are people going to sell it? Is it a feature that's important? How important is it? How much confidence do I need to have in that particular part of it? And so therefore we build up this bank of evidence to help understand exactly how the product will and should be used.
We've discussed a lot of good things along those lines, but I was thinking, just to try and talk about something else, is what about, we talk about things being good and good quality and having the understanding of things. What about externally facing your organization? What value does your organization get from having a tester or testing or good quality being external? If I think back to computer games, low bug count, good user experience, good quality sort of stuff, the testers don't get a big tick, obviously, unless there's hundreds of bugs. But there is that sort of perception that if something's been done really well, good quality, so therefore we imply there's been good testing and good feedback, that gives your company a great reputation. Maybe just as a final point, do you think you've got any sort of examples of that?
Yeah, again, I think you're right. There is one of the benefits of good testing is that it does act as that safety net that does enable a brand reputation to stay positive, because you're saving from, whether it be something as simple as the website's got typos in very important pieces, or whether it's something like money being lost and people's accounts being lost or something because of a defect. Reputation is important for businesses, and if testing can help with that, then absolutely it's one way to save on some of the embarrassment. And I've certainly been in places where we've tested stuff and we've gone, if that had got out, that would have been killer for our business. That would have been a big problem. And and at that point in time, because it's not gone live, because there's not been a big issue, it's just kind of like, oh, it's just another defect we found. But when you think about it afterwards, you think, yeah, that could have been nasty. But yeah, and in the moment in the business, you don't get that, wow, you saved our backsides there. It's more just oh, well done, another bug you found. And maybe in that respect, there's more we can do to articulate what we've done. But I don't know about you, but I'm not a tester because I want to save a business from going under. I'm a tester because I enjoy what we do, and I enjoy helping improve our products and making sure we release the best quality products at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I know that. So one of the companies I worked for had a lot to do with wizards, and particularly children wizards in a certain school. And one of the things, we didn't have fans who looked at the websites. We had true fanatics who looked at the website. So anytime a release happened, the two testers that we had, including myself, had to jump on the site and try and get through as much of the site as possible before anybody else did, in the hope that we would find the defect before some person would tweet about it. Oh, look, I found they had a typo, or this wasn't canon, or does that mean that this person is now actually in this, is the author showing that something new inadvertently or something, it's just, the way these sites go. And so, it was, there were a couple of times where we saved a little bit of embarrassment, and that's definitely adding value to the business, particularly when you've got fanatics as your key customers.
Alrighty then. Well, I've really enjoyed myself on this chat today. Thank you very much to Simon, Shey and David. Thank you for listening to us again. Thank you so much. We've somehow managed to persist through. I think this is going to be episode 60, 61, something like that. That's kind of wild. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the feedback. As Simon said, we got this idea for what to chat to today because of feedback from a listener for an idea, and we actually really, really value your feedback. And so if you do want to give us any feedback, please contact us via email at contactus@testingpeers.com, or reaching out to us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. We're not on TikTok, but we're waiting for Simon's greatest hits to come out on that. We do have a Patreon if you wish to support us and carry on doing those things.
Did you start our Snapchat page, Chris?
I don't know what Snapchat really is, to be honest. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any feedback, honestly, as long as it's constructive, like negative feedback, I got some not great stuff from my talk I did at Eurostar. Let's actually be constructive if we're going to give feedback, people. We'll do a different topic on that sometime. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for being here with us, and we'll see you next time. Or, you'll hear us. Thanks.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.